I watched my father, Gerald, slide the elegant resort vouchers across the white linen tablecloth, his weathered hands delivering them to each family member with theatrical precision. The steakhouse buzzed around us, crystal glasses, catching candlelight as he announced these were for family members who actually contribute to our success. When he deliberately skipped over me, the silence stretched like a taut wire. My brother Marcus leaned back in his leather chair, that familiar smirk spreading across his face. "Well, you don't," he said, his voice cutting through the expensive atmosphere. I lifted my bourbon glass, took a slow, measured drink, and stayed completely quiet while the humiliation settled deep in my chest. The amber liquid burned as it went down, but not nearly as much as the realization that crashed over me in that moment. Here I was, Christian Matthews, 28 years old, watching my own family treat me like I was invisible. The irony would have been funny if it wasn't so devastating. Those vouchers in their hands represented a week-long stay at Sunset Ridge Resort, one of the most exclusive family retreats in Colorado. What none of them knew, what they couldn't possibly comprehend, as they examined their golden tickets to luxury, was that I had personally designed and implemented every single digital system that resort used to operate. As the conversation resumed around the table, flowing over me like I was a piece of furniture, my mind drifted back to how this whole mess started. 5 years ago, fresh out of college with a computer science degree and a burning desire to prove myself, I had offered to help modernize the family businesses. Not because I needed the work, but because I thought it would bring us closer together. I thought it would earn me the respect and recognition I had craved since childhood. My father, Gerald, owned a sprawling real estate empire managing over 200 rental properties across 3 counties. My stepmother, Patricia, had built a boutique hotel chain from scratch, specializing in luxury weekend getaways for wealthy professionals. Marcus, my older brother by 3 years, ran the most successful luxury car dealership in the tri-state area. Jessica, my younger sister, had launched an event planning company that catered to high-end weddings and corporate functions. Even our cousin Dylan had gotten in on the family business tradition, owning a franchise of upscale restaurants that served farm-to-table cuisine. When I first approached them with proposals to streamline their operations through technology, they had been skeptical. Dad still preferred handwritten ledgers and filing cabinets. Patricia managed her hotel bookings through a notebook system that would have made accountants weep. Marcus tracked his inventory on spreadsheets that crashed regularly. Jessica coordinated million-dollar events using nothing but phone calls and post-it notes. Dylan ran his restaurants like it was 1975 with punch-card time clocks and manual cash registers. But I persisted, working nights and weekends to prove what modern systems could accomplish. I built Gerald a property management platform that automated rent collection, maintenance requests, and tenant communications. For Patricia, I designed a reservation system that integrated with online travel sites and handled everything from booking confirmations to guest preferences. Marcus got a comprehensive dealership management system that tracked sales inventory, financing, and customer relationships. Jessica received an event coordination platform that managed vendor contracts, timeline scheduling, and client communications. Dylan's restaurants were transformed with point-of-sale, systems inventory management, and employee scheduling software. The results had been spectacular. Gerald's rental income increased by 30% as vacant units were filled faster and maintenance issues were resolved efficiently. Patricia's hotel occupancy rates soared when guests could book online and received personalized service based on their stored preferences. Marcus's car sales doubled as the new system streamlined the entire purchase process and improved customer follow-up. Jessica's business exploded as clients raved about her professional organization and flawless event execution. Dylan's restaurants saw profit margins grow significantly through better inventory control and optimized staffing. But here's what really stung as I sat there listening to them laugh and plan their luxury vacation. I wasn't just their IT support guy. I was the architect of their entire digital infrastructure. Every website, every database, every automated system that kept their businesses running smoothly had been built by my hands, designed by my mind, and maintained through my constant vigilance. The vouchers they held were for a resort that operated on booking software I had custom coded. The reservation confirmations would be sent through email servers I managed. Their loyalty points and reward accounts were stored in databases I had designed and secured. Even the resort's internal systems for managing guest services, housekeeping schedules, and restaurant reservations were built on platforms I had developed for Patricia's hotel chain and then licensed to other properties. Yet here they sat, accepting Gerald's proclamation that I didn't contribute to the family's success. The man who had given them the tools to multiply their profits was being dismissed as irrelevant. The irony was so bitter I could taste it along with the expensive bourbon. As Gerald raised his glass for a toast to the family's continued prosperity, I made a decision that would change everything. I would show them exactly how much I contributed. I would demonstrate in the most direct way possible what happened when you took Christian Matthews out of the equation. But first, I needed to understand the full scope of what I was dealing with. I needed to go home, log into my systems, and see exactly how deep my integration into their business operations really went. The drive home from the restaurant felt like moving through thick fog, my mind processing the evening's humiliation, while my hands operated the steering wheel on autopilot. My apartment building rose before me in the darkness, a modest place that reflected my practical approach to life. While my family spent their increased profits on luxury cars and designer clothes, I had invested in top-tier computer equipment and a home office that rivaled any corporate IT department. I climbed the 2 flights of stairs to my unit, my footsteps echoing in the empty hallway. The familiar comfort of my space welcomed me as I switched on the lights, revealing walls lined with multiple monitors, server racks humming quietly in the corner, and cables organized with obsessive precision. This was my sanctuary, the place where I had built digital empires for people who apparently thought I was worthless. I settled into my ergonomic chair and powered up my primary workstation. As the screens flickered to life, I began pulling up administrative interfaces for each family business. What I discovered in the next 2 hours would have been shocking if it weren't so predictable. My family hadn't just been taking my contributions for granted. They had been actively planning to discard me entirely. The first revelation came through the family group chat system I had set up for coordinating business matters. But there was another chat one I wasn't supposed to know about called Real Family Business. My administrative access to their company communication servers meant I could see every conversation, and what I found there made my stomach turn. Messages going back 4 months painted a picture of casual contempt that took my breath away. Marcus had started a thread asking if they really needed the tech nerd anymore, suggesting that basic computer maintenance was something any college kid could handle for minimum wage. Patricia had chimed in with complaints about how I always made her feel stupid when I explained how her hotel systems worked, saying she preferred working with people who didn't make her feel inadequate. But Jessica's contributions were the most hurtful. My own sister, whom I had helped transform from a struggling event coordinator into the owner of a $1 million business, had written paragraph after paragraph about how awkward I made family gatherings. She complained that I didn't fit in with their social circle, that clients found me weird and intense, and that she was embarrassed to introduce me as her brother at networking events. Gerald's messages were brief but devastating. He had apparently been fielding suggestions from Patricia about updating his will specifically regarding my inheritance. Christian gets too much for what he actually does, Patricia had written. Real contributors should get real rewards. Gerald's response had been a simple, "We'll discuss this after the birthday dinner." The birthday dinner. Tonight's humiliation hadn't been spontaneous cruelty. It had been a calculated message. They had planned to put me in my place to make it clear that I was expendable before they cut me out entirely. But the most infuriating discovery came in a series of messages from 2 weeks ago. Marcus had apparently been interviewing replacement IT companies getting quotes for taking over the family's technology needs. The numbers they had been quoted were astronomical, reflecting the complexity of the systems I had built, but they seemed confident they could make the transition. Christian has everything so integrated and complicated, Marcus had written. The new company says they'll need to rebuild most of it from scratch, but at least we'll own our own systems instead of being dependent on him. What they didn't understand, what none of them could possibly grasp, was that they already owned their systems. I had never held their data hostage or maintained exclusive control out of some power trip. I had simply been the only one who understood how everything worked because I had built it all to their exact specifications and maintained it with meticulous care. But their messages revealed a fundamental misunderstanding of technology that would have been amusing if it weren't so insulting. They talked about basic computer stuff and simple website management, as if running their digital infrastructure was equivalent to checking email or posting on social media. They had no concept of server architecture, database design, cybersecurity protocols, or system integration. As I scrolled through months of these conversations, a cold fury began building in my chest. They wanted to find out what happened without me. They were about to get that education whether they wanted it or not. I opened a new terminal window and began exploring the true scope of my involvement in their businesses. What I found was even more extensive than I had remembered. Over 5 years of gradual expansion, I had become the central nervous system of their entire family enterprise. Every email server they used was hosted on infrastructure I owned and managed. Their websites weren't just designed by me. They ran on web servers in my name using domain registrations tied to my personal accounts. The customer databases containing years of client information, sales records, and business intelligence were stored on cloud platforms I had set up and paid for with costs reimbursed monthly by the family. Payment processing was entirely dependent on merchant accounts I had established using my excellent credit score and clean business history. When customers paid for hotel rooms, restaurant meals, event planning services, or luxury cars, the money flowed through systems that required my authorization and oversight. But it went deeper than just infrastructure. The custom software I had developed for each business wasn't generic off-the-shelf products they could replace easily. I had spent thousands of hours writing code specifically tailored to their unique needs, integrating systems in ways that maximized efficiency and profitability. Their inventory management, customer relationship management, financial reporting, and operational workflows were all built on platforms that existed nowhere else in the world. And then there were the licenses, subscriptions, and service agreements. Professional software that cost thousands of dollars annually, cloud storage services, cybersecurity platforms, backup systems, and monitoring tools. All tied to my personal accounts, all automatically charged to my credit cards with the understanding that I would be reimbursed promptly. The family group chat was still active with new messages appearing as they continued celebrating their resort vacation plans. I watched for a moment as they discussed spa appointments and golf tee times, completely oblivious to the storm that was about to engulf their comfortable world. It was time to show them exactly what Christian Matthews contributed to their success. It was time for them to learn what happened when you tried to cut the heart out of your own operation. As I dove deeper into my analysis, the full scope of my integration into their business operations became staggeringly clear. This wasn't a simple matter of providing technical support or maintaining a few websites. Over the past 5 years, I had gradually become the foundation upon which their entire commercial empire was built. The property management system I had created for Gerald wasn't just software. It was a comprehensive ecosystem that handled every aspect of his real estate operations. Rent collection happened automatically through payment processors tied to my merchant accounts. Maintenance requests from tenants flowed through ticketing systems hosted on my servers. Background checks for new renters were conducted through services I had subscribed to and managed. Even the financial reporting that Gerald used for tax purposes was generated by applications I had built and customized specifically for his business model. When I examined Patricia's hotel operations, the dependency was even more intricate. The reservation system I had developed didn't just take bookings. It was integrated with revenue management algorithms that automatically adjusted room prices based on demand competitor analysis and seasonal trends. Guest preferences were tracked and stored, allowing for personalized service that had become Patricia's signature advantage over larger hotel chains. The housekeeping management system coordinated staff schedules with checkout and check-in times. Even the minibar inventory and spa appointment scheduling were handled through platforms I had designed and maintained. Marcus's car dealership presented perhaps the most complex technical challenge I had ever tackled. The system I built integrated with manufacturer databases for inventory management credit bureaus for financing approvals and state motor vehicle departments for title transfers. Customer relationship management went beyond simple contact information. The platform tracked purchase history service preferences and even family member vehicle needs to enable a strategic sales timing. The financial reporting capabilities had transformed Marcus from someone who struggled with basic bookkeeping into a dealer who could analyze profit margins by individual salesperson vehicle model and monthly trends. Jessica's event planning business relied on coordination software that managed vendor relationships, client communications, timeline tracking, and budget monitoring across dozens of simultaneous projects. The platform I had built could handle everything from initial client consultations to final invoice processing with automated reminders, contract management, and resource allocation that allowed Jessica to manage events that would have required a team of coordinators using traditional methods. Dylan's restaurant operations had been revolutionized through point-of-sale integration with inventory management, employee scheduling, and financial reporting. The systems I had implemented could track food costs down to individual ingredients, optimize staff schedules based on historical customer patterns, and generate reports that identified the most profitable menu items and service times. But the technical architecture was only part of the story. The financial infrastructure was equally complex and entirely dependent on my personal involvement. Every domain name registration, web hosting account, and cloud service subscription was tied to my credit cards and personal accounts. I had established these arrangements during the early days when the family businesses were smaller and their credit profiles were less established. As their operations grew and became more sophisticated, we had simply maintained the existing structure because it worked efficiently. The merchant accounts processing their customer payments were particularly critical. These required extensive financial background checks, personal guarantees, and ongoing compliance monitoring. I had qualified for premium processing rates and terms that saved the family businesses thousands of dollars monthly in transaction fees. Replacing these accounts would require each business to go through lengthy approval processes, potentially facing higher costs and stricter terms. Software licensing represented another layer of complexity. Professional applications for accounting, customer management, cybersecurity, and business intelligence cost tens of thousands of dollars annually. I had negotiated enterprise agreements that covered all family businesses under umbrella licenses, achieving significant cost savings compared to individual subscriptions. These agreements were tied to my personal business credentials and couldn't be simply transferred to other parties. The data itself was perhaps the most valuable asset they didn't understand they were risking. Years of customer information, sales trends, operational metrics, and business intelligence were stored in databases I had designed and secured. This information enabled strategic decision-making that had contributed significantly to their growth and profitability. Losing access to historical data would be like performing surgery on their businesses while blindfolded. Security was another dimension they hadn't considered. I had implemented comprehensive cybersecurity measures that protected their businesses from the constant threats facing online operations. Firewall configurations, intrusion detection systems, data backup protocols, and disaster recovery plans were all managed through systems I had designed and monitored continuously. Without proper security oversight, their businesses would be vulnerable to data breaches, ransomware attacks, and other threats that could destroy their reputations and expose them to significant legal liability. As I cataloged the interconnections and dependencies, I realized that attempting to replace me wouldn't just be expensive and time-consuming. It would be nearly impossible without significant business disruption. The systems I had built were too integrated, too customized, and too essential to their daily operations to be quickly replicated or replaced. But what truly shocked me was discovering how much money flowed through accounts and services tied to my personal credentials. Monthly charges for hosting software security services and technical support totaled over $8,000, all automatically charged to my credit cards with the expectation of family reimbursement. Some months when annual license renewals came due, or additional services were needed, the charges could exceed $15,000. I had been operating essentially as an unpaid business partner, providing not just technical expertise but also financial backing and personal guarantees for critical business infrastructure. Yet they saw me as an easily replaceable vendor who could be dismissed without consequence. The family group chat was still active with messages about packing for their resort trip and making dinner reservations. They had no idea that their celebration was about to become a crisis. They couldn't imagine that their comfortable assumptions about business operations were built on foundations that could be removed with a few keystrokes. It was time for a reality check that would reshape their understanding of what Christian Matthews actually contributed to their success. It was time for them to experience their businesses without the infrastructure they had taken for granted for 5 years. I cracked my knuckles and pulled up the resort's administrative interface, the same custom platform I had built for Patricia's hotels and licensed to other luxury properties. The Sunset Ridge Resort vouchers my family clutched so proudly were about to become worthless pieces of paper. With a few clicks, I accessed the reservation management system and located each family member's booking. Gerald and Patricia had reserved the presidential suite. Marcus had booked a luxury room with mountain views. Jessica had selected a spa package room. Dylan had chosen the standard deluxe accommodations. All confirmed, all paid for through corporate accounts that traced back to systems I controlled. Canceling the reservations was almost too easy. The administrative interface allowed me to void bookings, refund payments, and blacklist confirmation numbers with minimal effort. But I didn't stop there. I also flagged their names in the customer database with notes about fraudulent voucher usage, ensuring that any future attempts to book at partner resorts would trigger security reviews. The cancellation confirmation emails would hit their inboxes within minutes, but they probably wouldn't check email until morning. By then, it would be too late to salvage their vacation plans, especially during peak season when luxury resorts were booked months in advance. But canceling their weekend getaway was just the beginning. As I stared at the glowing monitors surrounding me, I realized this was an opportunity to demonstrate the true scope of my involvement in their business operations. If they wanted to know what happened without Christian Matthews in the picture, they were about to get a comprehensive education. I started with the foundation domain name registrations. Every family business website operated on domains I had registered and maintained through my personal accounts. With a few administrative commands, I updated the registration contacts, removed auto-renewal settings, and changed the access credentials. Their websites wouldn't disappear immediately, but any attempt to modify content or renew services would require going through me. Next came the web hosting accounts. I didn't shut down their websites entirely, that would be too obvious and potentially illegal. Instead, I implemented what appeared to be routine maintenance mode pages that would display temporarily unavailable for updates messages to visitors. The sites would appear to be experiencing technical difficulties rather than deliberate sabotage. Email servers required a more subtle approach. I configured mail filters that would bounce incoming messages back to senders with automated responses indicating temporary service interruptions. Outgoing email would be severely limited, preventing mass communications to customers or vendors. The email accounts wouldn't stop working completely, but they would become unreliable enough to cause significant business disruption. Customer databases were where I could inflict the most strategic damage. I didn't delete any data that would be destructive and potentially criminal. Instead, I changed access permissions and authentication requirements. Employees trying to look up customer information, sales records, or inventory data would find themselves locked out of the systems they depended on for daily operations. The data would still exist safely backed up and secure, but it would be inaccessible without administrative credentials only I possessed. Payment processing required delicate handling. I couldn't simply shut down the merchant accounts, as that would prevent legitimate customer transactions and could expose me to serious legal consequences. Instead, I modified the authorization levels and notification settings. New transactions would require manual approval rather than automatic processing, creating delays and complications for customer purchases. Additionally, all transaction notifications would be rerouted exclusively to my email addresses, meaning the families wouldn't receive real-time sales reports or payment confirmations. The point-of-sale systems in Dylan's restaurants and Marcus's dealership presented interesting opportunities for disruption. I remotely updated the software with new authentication requirements that would prevent employees from processing transactions without administrative approval. The systems would still function for basic operations, but any significant sales or complex transactions would be blocked pending management authorization. For Gerald's property management operations, I implemented maintenance mode across all tenant-facing interfaces. Rent payment portals would display messages about system upgrades, preventing tenants from making online payments. Maintenance request systems would be temporarily disabled, forcing tenants to call directly for service issues. The property management dashboard Gerald used to monitor his empire would show connectivity errors and data synchronization failures. Jessica's event planning coordination platform required a more nuanced approach. I couldn't risk disrupting actual events in progress, as that could harm innocent clients and vendors. Instead, I modified the scheduling and communication systems to prevent new bookings or vendor coordination. Existing events would proceed normally, but Jessica's ability to plan future events would be severely compromised. Patricia's hotel booking systems were the most complex to sabotage strategically. I implemented rolling maintenance windows that would make reservation systems unavailable during peak booking hours. Existing guest services would continue normally to avoid harming innocent travelers, but new reservations would be impossible during the times when most people searched for accommodations. By 2 a.m, I had systematically modified or restricted access to every critical business system the family relied upon. The changes were designed to appear like technical difficulties rather than deliberate sabotage, providing me with plausible deniability while maximizing business disruption. But the real masterstroke was yet to come. I pulled up the family group chat system and watched as my relatives continued planning their now canceled vacation. Their messages were filled with excitement about spa treatments and golf games they would never experience. The irony was delicious. Then I noticed something that made me smile grimly. The group chat system they were using to coordinate their business and personal communications was hosted on servers I managed and paid for. Their entire digital communication infrastructure was dependent on services tied to my personal accounts. With a few keystrokes, I modified the chat server permissions. The existing conversation history would remain accessible, but no new messages could be sent or received. Their primary coordination tool would simply stop working with error messages suggesting temporary server maintenance. I also decided to accelerate the financial consequences of their dismissive attitude toward my contributions. I began systematically removing my personal guarantees and billing authorizations from every service and subscription their businesses depended upon. Hosting accounts, software licenses, security services, backup systems, and cloud storage subscriptions all required immediate payment or credit verification to continue operating. The automated billing systems would start sending overdue notices and service suspension warnings within hours. By tomorrow evening, if the accounts weren't updated with new payment methods, critical services would begin shutting down automatically. As I worked through the methodical process of disconnecting myself from their business infrastructure, I felt a strange sense of liberation. For 5 years, I had been invisibly supporting their success, maintaining their systems, solving their problems, and enabling their growth. I had been taken for granted, dismissed as irrelevant, and ultimately humiliated for my trouble. Now, they would discover what their businesses looked like without the foundation I had built and maintained. They would learn the true cost of replacing specialized expertise in custom systems. Most importantly, they would understand exactly how much Christian Matthews had been contributing to their success all along. The sun was beginning to rise as I finished implementing the final changes. I had worked through the night, but the adrenaline of righteous revenge had kept me focused and energetic. My family would wake up to a day of chaos and confusion, scrambling to understand why their businesses had suddenly stopped functioning properly. I poured myself a cup of coffee and settled back in my chair to monitor the administrative dashboards. The error reports and system failures were already beginning to accumulate. Service suspension notices were being generated automatically. Email bounce-backs were increasing steadily. In a few hours, when the family businesses opened for the day, the real fun would begin. Employees would arrive to find systems offline, customers would encounter error messages, and vendors would receive bounced communications. The efficient operations they had taken for granted would grind to a halt, replaced by confusion and frustration. And somewhere in the middle of this chaos, my family would finally understand that Christian Matthews wasn't just some expendable tech support guy they could dismiss and replace at will. They would learn that I had been the invisible architect of their success, and that removing me from the equation would cost them far more than they had ever imagined possible. My phone started ringing at 6:30 in the morning. I let the first 3 calls go to voicemail, savoring my coffee, while monitoring the cascade of system failures spreading across the family businesses. By 7 o'clock, the calls were coming every few minutes, the desperation evident in the increasing frequency. The first voicemail was from Marcus, his voice tight with poorly controlled panic. "Christian, something's wrong with the dealership computer system. None of the guys can log into anything, and we've got customers coming in for deliveries this morning. Call me back immediately." Jessica's message came 20 minutes later, her usually composed tone cracking with stress. "The event coordination platform is completely down. I have 3 weddings this weekend and I can't access vendor contracts or timeline schedules. Please tell me this is just a temporary glitch." But it was Gerald's third message that truly captured the scope of the crisis. His voice, normally commanding and confident, carried an edge of confusion that I had never heard before. "Christian, I need you to call me back right now. Everything's broken. The rental payment system, the tenant database, the maintenance tracking. My property managers are calling saying they can't do anything. Fix this." I decided to check the business operations firsthand before responding to any calls. Using my administrative access, I pulled up real-time monitoring dashboards for each company. The results exceeded my expectations for chaos and disruption. Gerald's property management crisis was spreading exponentially. Tenants trying to pay rent online were met with maintenance messages and error screens. The tenant portal that normally handled hundreds of transactions daily was completely offline, forcing residents to call the property management office directly. Gerald's small administrative staff was being overwhelmed with phone calls from confused tenants who couldn't understand why their regular payment methods weren't working. But the real crisis was in maintenance operations. The automated work order system that dispatched repair technicians based on tenant requests had been offline for over 6 hours. Emergency maintenance issues, routine repairs, and scheduled inspections were all backing up in a queue that nobody could access or manage. Property managers were resorting to handwritten notes and phone calls trying to coordinate maintenance activities using methods they hadn't relied on in years. Marcus's luxury car dealership was facing a different but equally severe crisis. The inventory management system that tracked vehicle availability, customer deposits, and delivery schedules was locked behind authentication barriers that only I could bypass. Sales associates arriving for the morning shift found themselves unable to access customer files, financing applications, or even basic vehicle information. 3 customers had already arrived for scheduled vehicle deliveries, only to discover that the dealership couldn't access their purchase contracts, financing agreements, or delivery paperwork. Marcus was attempting to handle these situations manually, but without access to the integrated systems that managed every aspect of the sales process. Even simple transactions had become impossibly complicated. Patricia's hotel operations were being crippled by the rolling booking system outages I had implemented. The previous night's guest checkouts had proceeded normally, but new reservation attempts were failing during peak booking hours. The hotel's front desk staff could manage existing guests, but they couldn't process new bookings or modify existing reservations. Corporate clients trying to book conference rooms and group accommodations were being turned away due to system unavailability. Jessica's event planning business was perhaps suffering the most immediate crisis. With 3 major weddings scheduled for the weekend, she needed constant access to vendor coordination systems, timeline management tools, and client communication platforms. The coordination software I had built for her business was sophisticated enough to manage dozens of moving parts, simultaneously tracking everything from flower delivery schedules to catering setup times. Without access to these systems, Jessica was trying to coordinate complex events using nothing but phone calls and hastily scribbled notes. Vendors were confused about timing and responsibilities. Clients were concerned about whether their events would proceed smoothly. The professional efficiency that had built Jessica's reputation was evaporating in real time. Dylan's restaurant operations were facing their own unique challenges. The point-of-sale systems that normally processed customer payments, tracked inventory usage, and managed employee schedules were requiring manual authorization for every transaction. During breakfast service, this meant customers were experiencing extended wait times for payment processing. The kitchen staff couldn't access inventory information to prepare for lunch service. Employee scheduling for the weekend was completely disrupted. By 9 o'clock, Gerald had apparently reached his limit for attempted self-reliance. My monitoring system showed that he had hired Rapid Response IT Solutions, a premium emergency technical service company that charged $3,000 per day for urgent business system restoration. I watched with amusement as their technicians began attempting to diagnose the widespread system failures. Within 2 hours, I could see their remote access sessions trying to trace network connections, identify server configurations, and understand the architecture of the systems I had built. The rapid response team was competent, but they quickly discovered the scope of the challenge they faced. My custom-developed platforms weren't based on standard commercial software they could easily recognize and repair. The integration between different business systems was complex and proprietary. Most critically, the authentication and access control systems I had designed required specific credentials and authorization protocols that couldn't be bypassed through conventional technical methods. By noon, the situation had escalated further. Patricia had hired her own emergency IT consultant, Premium Business Systems Recovery, at $4,000 per day. Jessica had contracted with Digital Solutions Express for $2,500 daily. Even Dylan had brought in a local computer repair service at $800 per day. Multiple teams of expensive technicians were now crawling through the family's business systems trying to understand why everything had stopped working simultaneously. They discovered the common thread quickly enough. Every system was integrated with infrastructure controlled by a single administrator. But understanding the problem and solving it were entirely different challenges. The custom software I had developed over 5 years wasn't documented in ways that outside technicians could easily interpret. The database schema's API integrations and security protocols were unique to each business, but interconnected in ways that made isolated fixes impossible. Attempting to restore access to one system without understanding its dependencies on other systems would likely cause additional failures. By 2 p.m, I had received 37 phone calls and 42 voicemails from various family members and their hired technical consultants. The voicemails had evolved from confused requests for help to angry demands for immediate action to desperate pleas for any kind of assistance. The most revealing message came from the lead technician at Rapid Response IT Solutions. He had apparently gotten my contact information from Gerald and called directly. "Mr. Matthews, this is David Chen from Rapid Response. I need to speak with you immediately about your family's business systems. What we're looking at here is incredibly sophisticated custom development work. The integration between platforms is beyond anything my team has encountered in emergency recovery situations. We were going to need your direct involvement to restore functionality without causing data loss or additional system damage." A follow-up call from Patricia's consultant was even more direct. "Christian, this is Amanda Foster from Premium Business Systems. I've been working in IT recovery for 15 years, and I've never seen anything like what you've built for these businesses. The architecture is brilliant, but it's too complex for us to reverse engineer quickly. We're estimating 6 months and over $200,000 to rebuild everything from scratch, and that's assuming we can access all the original data. You need to call me back immediately." But the message that truly captured the desperation was from Marcus himself, recorded at 3:15 in the afternoon. His voice was hoarse from stress and exhaustion. "Christian, whatever's happening, whatever we did wrong, we need to fix this immediately. I've got 15 customers who can't pick up their cars because we can't access any purchase information. Jessica's wedding clients are threatening to sue if their events get ruined. Dad's tenants are talking about breaking leases because they can't pay rent or get maintenance service. We're losing thousands of dollars every hour this continues. Please, please call me back." The technical consultants were discovering what I had known all along. The systems I had built weren't just software applications that could be easily replaced or bypassed. They were comprehensive business infrastructures that had been carefully designed, integrated, and optimized over years of development and refinement. Attempting to replicate this work quickly was like trying to rebuild a symphony orchestra during the middle of a performance. As evening approached, the financial impact was becoming staggering. Gerald's property management company was facing potential lease violations and tenant lawsuits. Marcus's dealership was losing sales and damaging relationships with customers and manufacturers. Patricia's hotels were turning away bookings during their busiest season. Jessica was risking her professional reputation with clients who had paid tens of thousands of dollars for events that might not proceed as planned. Dylan's restaurants were operating inefficiently with frustrated staff and customers, but the most expensive consequence was the emergency technical support itself. 5 different consulting teams working around the clock at premium rates were generating bills that would exceed $20,000 daily. And despite their collective expertise and massive financial investment, None of them could restore the functionality that the family businesses had lost when they decided Christian Matthews didn't contribute to their success. The irony was perfect. In trying to prove they didn't need me, they were spending more money in 2 days than I had cost them in an entire year of technical support and system maintenance. They were learning in the most expensive way possible exactly what my contributions were worth. The pounding on my apartment door started at 8:30 on the third morning of the crisis. I had been expecting this visit, monitoring their increasingly frantic communications, as the technical consultants admitted defeat and the daily financial losses mounted into tens of thousands of dollars. Through the security monitor, I could see Gerald, Patricia, and Marcus standing in the hallway. Gerald's usually immaculate appearance showed signs of stress, wrinkled clothes, unkempt hair, and the exhausted look of someone who hadn't slept properly in days. Patricia clutched her phone with white knuckles, probably calculating the mounting costs of canceled bookings and emergency IT services. Marcus looked like he wanted to punch through the door. I took my time walking to the entrance, straightening my comfortable clothes and running a hand through my hair. When I opened the door, the contrast between their agitated states and my calm demeanor was immediately apparent. "We need to talk," Gerald said without preamble, his voice carrying the authoritative tone he used in business negotiations. But there was an undercurrent of desperation that undermined his attempt at control. "Good morning to you too," I replied, stepping aside to let them enter. "Please come in. Can I get anyone coffee?" They filed into my living room, their eyes immediately drawn to the array of monitors and technical equipment that filled one wall. For the first time, they were seeing the nerve center from which I had managed their digital empires for 5 years. Marcus couldn't contain himself any longer. "Christian, what the hell is going on? Everything's broken. We've spent over $60,000 on emergency IT consultants and none of them can fix anything. They all keep saying we need your involvement to restore the systems." I settled into my desk chair, swiveling to face them while they remained standing in obvious agitation. "I'm not sure I understand the problem, Marcus. At the birthday dinner, you made it very clear that I don't contribute to the family's success. I assumed you had everything under control." Patricia stepped forward, her carefully maintained composure cracking. "Christian, this isn't the time for games. My hotels have lost over $40,000 in bookings this week. The technical consultants are telling me that rebuilding our reservation systems could take 6 months and cost $250,000. We need you to fix whatever's gone wrong with our computer systems." "Nothing's gone wrong with your computer systems," I replied calmly. "They're working exactly as designed. The issue is that you no longer have authorized access to systems that require my personal credentials and administrative oversight." Gerald's face was reddening with a combination of frustration and dawning understanding. "What are you talking about?" "Those are our business systems. We own them." I couldn't help but smile at his fundamental misunderstanding. "Actually, you don't own them, Dad. You own the data and you own the businesses that use the systems. But the infrastructure, the software, the hosting accounts, the domain registrations, the security certificates, the merchant processing accounts, and the service contracts are all tied to my personal accounts and credentials." "That's ridiculous," Marcus snapped. "Why would everything be set up that way? Because 5 years ago, when I offered to help modernize your businesses, none of you had the technical knowledge, credit history, or business relationships necessary to establish enterprise-level IT infrastructure," I explained patiently. "I used my credentials, my credit, and my expertise to build systems that transformed your small operations into major commercial enterprises." I stood up and walked to my main workstation, pulling up a financial spreadsheet I had prepared for this moment. "Since we're all here, let me show you something interesting. Over the past 5 years, I've paid for hosting services, software licenses, security platforms, backup systems, and technical support subscriptions, totaling over $320,000. That's money that came out of my personal accounts to keep your businesses running. Patricia's face went pale as she processed the number. But we reimburse you for those expenses. Sometimes, I corrected. When you remember and when it's convenient. I've got records showing that you're currently $47,000 behind on reimbursements for the past 18 months. But that's not the real issue. I turned back to face them, my voice growing harder. The real issue is that you decided I was expendable. You concluded that my contributions weren't valuable enough to warrant basic respect, let alone inclusion in family celebrations. So, I decided to show you exactly what your businesses look like without those contributions. Gerald was beginning to understand the scope of his miscalculation. Christian, if this is about the birthday dinner, we can discuss that. But you can't hold our livelihoods hostage over a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding. I let out a bitter laugh. Dad, I found your hidden group chat. I've read every message where you discuss cutting me out of the will, where Marcus calls me the tech nerd, where Jessica complains about being embarrassed by me, where Patricia suggests I get paid too much for basic computer stuff. The silence that followed was deafening. They had been caught red-handed, their casual cruelty exposed in detail. I know about the replacement IT companies you've been interviewing Marcus. I know about the plans to transition away from my services. I know Patricia has been pushing Dad to minimize my inheritance because I supposedly don't contribute enough to deserve it. Marcus's attempt at defiance crumbled. We were just exploring options. That doesn't mean we wanted to cut you out completely. No. I pulled up another screen showing the technical consultant reports I had intercepted through my administrative access. Because according to the emergency recovery specialists you hired, replacing my custom systems would require rebuilding everything from scratch. 6 months of development time. Over $200,000 in costs, and that's assuming you could find developers capable of replicating 5 years of specialized work. I turned to face Patricia directly. Your hotel consultant specifically noted that the reservation system I built for you is more sophisticated than what most major hotel chains use. The integration with revenue management, customer preferences, and operational coordination is apparently unprecedented in the boutique hotel industry. Patricia shifted uncomfortably, unable to meet my eyes. And Marcus, your automotive consultant, was quite impressed by the dealership management platform. Apparently, the integration between inventory financing, customer relationships, and manufacturer systems is exceptionally advanced compared to standard dealer software. He estimated that replicating its functionality would require a team of 6 developers working for 8 months. But I wasn't finished. I had one more revelation that would complete their education about the consequences of dismissing Christian Matthews. Here's what none of you understood when you decided I was expendable. I continued pulling up another set of files. Through my administrative access to your business systems, I've been automatically monitoring your financial transactions for security and backup purposes. What I discovered is that you've been engaging in some very questionable business practices. Gerald's face went white. What are you talking about? I'm talking about unreported cash transactions, Marcus. Your dealership has been selling vehicles off the books to avoid tax obligations. I'm talking about skimmed revenue, Patricia. Your hotels have been underreporting cash payments and keeping dual accounting records. I'm talking about hidden rental income, Dad. You've been collecting cash from certain tenants and failing to report it as taxable income. The room fell completely silent as the implications sank in. Dylan's restaurants have been systematically underreporting cash sales to reduce tax liability. Jessica's business has been accepting cash payments for events without proper documentation. All of this has been flowing through payment systems and accounting platforms that I designed and monitored. Patricia found her voice first, though it was barely above a whisper. You're threatening to turn us into the IRS. I'm not threatening anything, I replied calmly. I'm simply pointing out that your businesses have been operating in ways that could expose you to serious legal consequences, and all of that activity has been documented in systems that I control and maintain. Gerald slumped into a chair, the full weight of their situation finally becoming clear. What do you want, Christian? I want what I've always wanted, Dad. I want to be treated like a member of this family instead of hired help that you can dismiss when convenient. I want recognition for the work I've done to build your success. I want respect for the expertise that transformed your small businesses into major operations. I sat back down, my voice softening slightly. I want an apology for 5 years of being taken for granted. I want acknowledgement that Christian Matthews has contributed more to this family's financial success than anyone else at that birthday dinner table. Marcus looked like he wanted to argue, but the evidence was overwhelming. Their businesses were completely paralyzed without my systems. Emergency consultants had confirmed that replacing my work would be extraordinarily expensive and time-consuming. And now they understood that I had documented information about business practices that could destroy them if revealed to authorities. And most importantly, I concluded, I want assurance that this family will never again make the mistake of assuming they can succeed without the foundation I've built for them. The confrontation that they had planned as an angry demand for system restoration had become a lesson in the real dynamics of power and dependency within the family business empire. They had come expecting to intimidate me into compliance, but they were leaving with a much clearer understanding of who actually controlled their commercial success. The silence stretched for nearly 5 minutes as my family processed the full scope of their miscalculation. Gerald sat slumped in the chair. Patricia stared at her phone screen without seeing it, and Marcus paced nervously near the windows. The comfortable assumptions that had guided their treatment of me for 5 years had been completely shattered. Finally, Gerald raised his head and looked directly at me. Christian, what you've shown us today has been a wake-up call that I honestly didn't see coming. I thought I understood how our businesses worked, but clearly I was operating with incomplete information. He stood up slowly, his movements showing the exhaustion of 3 days spent dealing with system failures and mounting costs. I owe you an apology that's 5 years overdue. We all do. The way we treated you at the birthday dinner was inexcusable, but apparently it was just the visible tip of a much larger problem. Patricia stepped forward, her usual composure replaced by genuine remorse. Christian, I want you to know that my suggestions about your inheritance weren't based on an accurate understanding of your contributions. I was seeing only the surface level of what you do not, the foundation you've built that makes everything else possible. I was jealous. Marcus admitted, his voice tight with embarrassment. Your technical expertise made me feel stupid, so instead of asking you to teach me, I convinced myself that what you did wasn't really that important. The past 3 days have been a harsh education in how wrong I was. Over the next 2 hours, we had the most honest conversation our family had shared in years. They wanted to understand exactly how the business systems worked, what my role had been in their development and maintenance, and how we could restructure our relationship to prevent similar misunderstandings in the future. I explained the technical architecture in terms they could grasp, helping them appreciate the complexity and integration that had made their businesses so efficient. We discussed the financial arrangements, clarifying the distinction between infrastructure costs and service fees. Most importantly, we talked about communication, acknowledging that my family's lack of technical knowledge had created a barrier to understanding my contributions. Gerald proposed immediate changes that demonstrated his commitment to rebuilding our relationship. First, he wanted to clear up all outstanding reimbursements with a payment that would cover not just the overdue expenses, but also a bonus recognizing my financial support over the years. Second, he suggested formalizing my role with written consulting contracts that would establish clear expectations and compensation for ongoing technical services. But the most significant change was his proposal to include me in strategic business discussions going forward. Instead of treating technology as a separate support function, he wanted to integrate technical considerations into planning processes so that everyone understood how operational decisions affected the digital infrastructure. Patricia offered to cover the costs of transitioning critical accounts from my personal credentials to business accounts, a process that would reduce my financial exposure while maintaining my administrative oversight. She also suggested establishing a family technology council that would meet quarterly to review system performance plan improvements and ensure that everyone stayed informed about technical developments. Marcus surprised me by asking if I would be willing to train him on basic system administration. He wanted to understand enough about the technical side to serve as a backup administrator and to communicate more effectively with technical vendors. His willingness to acknowledge his knowledge gap and ask for help represented a fundamental shift in his attitude. Over the following week, I began gradually restoring their business systems while implementing the changes we had discussed. The process was methodical and educational. Instead of simply fixing everything overnight, I used the restoration as an opportunity to document procedures and train family members on basic troubleshooting. Jessica and Dylan, who had missed the confrontation but were certainly affected by the business disruption, reached out individually to thank me and apologize for their roles in the group chat conversations. Jessica admitted that her embarrassment about my social awkwardness had been unfair and shallow. Dylan acknowledged that he had benefited enormously from the restaurant management systems without ever properly appreciating the work involved in creating and maintaining them. The technical consultants who had been hired during the crisis became valuable resources for the transition process. Instead of trying to replace my systems, they worked under my direction to improve documentation, implement additional security measures, and establish backup procedures. Their professional assessment of my work provided objective validation that helped the family understand the sophistication and value of what I had built. 3 months after the birthday dinner crisis, we held a follow-up family meeting to review the changes and plan for the future. The transformation in family dynamics was remarkable. Technical discussions were now routine parts of business planning. Everyone had basic understanding of how their operations depended on digital systems. Most importantly, I was included as an equal participant in family business decisions. Gerald presented me with a formal partnership agreement that recognized my contributions with equity stakes in each family business. The legal documentation established my rights and responsibilities while providing financial security that reflected my actual value to their operations. The partnership structure also included provisions for expanding my role in strategic planning and business development. But the most meaningful change wasn't financial or legal. It was personal. For the first time since childhood, I felt like I truly belonged in my family. The respect and recognition I had craved for years was finally genuine, based on clear understanding rather than polite obligation. 6 months later, the family business retreat that had originally excluded me became a celebration of our restructured relationships. We returned to Sunset Ridge Resort, but this time I was there as an honored partner rather than an invisible support person. The conversations during our mountain getaway focused on future growth opportunities and collaborative projects that would leverage our combined expertise. The crisis that began with a humiliating public dismissal had ultimately taught us all valuable lessons about the importance of recognizing and appreciating the contributions of others. My family learned that expertise comes in many forms, and that dismissing someone's value can have serious consequences. I learned that standing up for myself was sometimes necessary to earn the respect I deserved. Looking back on the experience, I realized that the most important outcome wasn't the financial recognition or the formal business partnerships, though those were certainly gratifying. The real victory was establishing relationships based on mutual understanding and genuine respect. The family I had always wanted to be part of had finally become a reality. The technical systems that had been the source of so much conflict became symbols of our collaboration. Every successful transaction, every satisfied customer, and every operational improvement served as a reminder that we were stronger together than any of us could be alone. As I tell this story, I often think about the lesson that emerged from those difficult days. Sometimes people don't appreciate what they have until they lose it. Sometimes the most valuable contributions are the ones that remain invisible until they disappear. And sometimes the only way to earn respect is to demand it by demonstrating exactly what life would be like without you. The birthday dinner that was meant to put me in my place instead became the catalyst for putting our family relationships on a foundation of honesty and mutual appreciation. The vouchers that symbolized my exclusion from family success became the first step toward genuine inclusion in family partnership. Have you ever been in a situation where your contributions were overlooked or undervalued by people who should have known better? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments about how you handled being taken for granted and what you learned from standing up for yourself. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe for more real-life stories about family dynamics, workplace relationships, and finding the courage to demand the respect you deserve. Share this with someone who might need the reminder that their contributions matter even when others fail to recognize them. Thanks for listening, and remember that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is show people exactly what they stand to lose when they take you for granted.